Day two, any thoughts?
They do. Here's to more progress.
Do you have expectations for further treatments
Oh,
today?
yeah. Yeah.
What would you like to see happen?
Less pain.
Sounds good.
Better. Not bad. We'll take that. We'll take that over the course of one day. All right, my friend, just took eyes closed here for me, so I don't get the light in your eyes. Just the setup of the light, again, just kind of floods the body with a bunch of extra energy. So as we do this, it'll take just a little bit more. Pretty well planned level now. Yeah. He's almost squared there. Okay, good, good. I'm just gonna hold some pressure. Again, that's not a lot of pressure, but if you feel too much, you tell me, okay?
Okay.
Now, where are you applying pressure?
Apply pressure basically right up at the top, between the atlas and the top bone of the neck and the skull bone. And everyone's patterns are different with this, and their angles are different. So there's a lot more to this joint than we gave it credit for. And soon we'll start adding current to this too as well.
Adding current, electrical current?
Yeah. Right now we're in the kind of test and see how we do neurologically. And I'm of the fan of like adding pieces in as we go.
Okay.
So we don't add everything in together, because then you can't tell what does what. You know, so we want to know what gives us the biggest reaction or a small reaction, because ultimately, you know, we're going to treat the way a system reacts, not necessarily what we see on blood work. You know, so the reaction is kind of the most important thing. The blood work is a helpful tool of kind of where you think you're going to start, but again, the body's going to run that. It's going to dictate where we go, what we do, how we do it.
When would we do the urinalysis?
We'll actually get that picked up. We'll, once we build him up a little bit, we'll start to do the detox, because I always do the urinalysis a bit after we start the detox, so you get so it's basically a challenge. Because sometimes when you do it, especially when you have a problem like something like this, those chemicals have been in the system for a long time, and they're pretty well bound up at this point. So you might get a reading that's not exactly representative of where we are, because you're not going to get as much dumping out as you would expect to see. Then all of a sudden, when we start challenging and you start actively pulling something out, you get this huge dump out and you see how much is actually in the system. So instead of testing it twice and putting the body through that, we know it's there, we're just going to jump in and see exactly where we're at, rather than running multiple tests. There's no need for it. But yeah, that's something we'll pick up on relatively quickly. Again, it's like anything else. Any other time you do detox, one of the biggest trouble people have with detox is they just jump in too quick.
Yeah.
You got to build up before you start breaking down at first. Otherwise, you can do it. It's just not as pleasant. And I want it to be as pleasant for you as we can. Let's not make this as easy as it could be. So is that sense of relaxation kicking on over you there?
Yeah, I can't tell. Yeah, I see it is.
And is that the same with the supplements? We'll wait on those until other things are...
Yeah, we want to just, and that'll be relatively quick. We just want to see how neurologically. I always like to see how the nerve, because ultimately the nervous system is going to guide and control all of this. That's pretty well straightforward. So I always like to see how the nervous system reacts just when we try to boost and regulate that function, because that's going to give us the clearest, representation of how someone's going to move forward. What their nervous system can handle will give you insight into what their immune system can handle or what their detox can handle, because it's ultimately got to be run by your brain. So we always kind of work with that at first off, and then we start adding in pieces at a time right away. And then everything is done to just facilitate that healing, taking the pressure off so that the brain can then start saying, okay, I have what I need, or now we need to do this, and then it starts to prioritize. We just give it what it needs and try to follow those cues as best as we can from the outside. Luckily, like I said, the technology makes it a lot easier now.
He mentioned having, my dad mentioned having balance issues in particular, and wondering, we were kind of hypothesizing about that today, balance between the physical and balance between the neurological. What is your thought on that between the...
Yeah, they're essentially one and the same thing. Because basically balance, most people will hear the ideology of balance and they'll run right to like an ENT because they'll think it's their ears, which again, it is. It's a major function of it. I'm not saying it's not. Think of your ears like a level. When you go to level out a picture, it's got the little bubble in the middle, and those little pressure receptors are going to tell you where you are from side by side if your head's out of position. But two of the other major players when it comes to balance are your vision, your eyes. And the other one is what we call mechanoreceptors. Basically, they're like pressure scales that tell you where your body is in special arrangement. So you have them in your neck. You have the biggest assortment of them right where my fingers are basically right now. It tells you if your head is straight, if your head's bent to one side, if it's leaning one way versus the other. You have them in your feet. So your feet have to be able to grab the ground, know where they're hitting and where they are arrangement-wise. Your eyes are really important with this. Because if you can't track, think about like when you're in a plane, if you fly a plane, they always have that gadget, the artificial horizon, because there's nothing to see up there. All the clouds look the same. If the line is straight across, then they can tell if the plane is level or not. So your eyes have to make the same kind of artificial horizon for you when you're around it. People know this. They've experienced it if you've ever drank too much. You close your eyes, you lay down, you close your eyes, you get the spins. It's because now your proprioception is all screwed up from the alcohol. Your eyes are one of the things that still works the best, but then you take that out of place by closing your eyes. Now your brain can't tell who's lying to it, and then you start spinning.
Now, what'd you call it again?
Proprioception.
Proprioception.
It's basically where your body is in space, in spatial arrangement.
So does that have to do with, I was watching an interview today with Peyton Manning talking to Dave Letterman about his regeneration of nerves and getting back. He said he didn't know where his arm was to be able to throw.
Sure.
Same type of idea.
Same idea. Same idea.
You and
It's
Peyton
actually...
Manning did.
Yeah, you still got a career in the NFL. It's actually, it's anything. It's the movement of legs and stuff like that. A lot of the times, people have balance issues just because not sure where their brain can't tell where their body is. That's the repetition. Somebody like a Peyton Manning has really enhanced proprioception because it's that, can they repeat that mechanic again without even thinking about it? He's not thinking, my pinky has to go here, the ball has to come off of my hand this kind of way. I mean, that is ingrained. It's the difference between him and somebody like me, where I don't have that. They just pick it up so much faster. Elite level athletes. There will be real physiological reasons as to why they are elite and why somebody else wouldn't be there.
Does his case study teach us anything about nerve regeneration? Would that have any play in my dad's? Our nerves, what we're trying to regenerate at all, or?
I think overall it does, just because it bucks that idea that we had for so many years that nerves can't regenerate. And again, running those pathways and giving the body what it needs, and again, getting out of the way and letting it do what it needs to do to heal, you see these kinds of things. And somebody as high profile as Peyton Manning is as amazing as he is at what he does, and being under that kind of pressure and scrutiny and everything else like that, it just kind of brought it to the forefront. But yeah, it's the same conversation we're always having, that world of, oops, sorry, you have a nerve problem, nothing we can do about it anymore. That conversation's over. We know so much more now, and in a good way. The example I always give with that, it's kind of the best example that we would see, is take somebody like Ozzy Osbourne, right? Ozzy, he's a mess, right? And you gotta love the guy, but he was a very influential musician, but he's done a lot of damage to himself over the years with drugs and alcohol and things like that, and he can barely move. He can barely speak, and when he speaks, you can barely understand what he's saying. And you know, not that long ago, on my bucket list was I wanted to go see Black Sabbath, you know, because it was one of the more influential. I'm big into music. It was one of the more influential bands. I was like, yeah, I want to cross that off my list. And I went and saw it. And it was actually at the time when Ozzy was doing his show, and he was a mess, right? You couldn't understand. Everyone was you know, kind of giving him a hard time. And then he goes out there and sings, and it sounds like it's the middle of the 1980s, and it sounds like Ozzy Osbourne from Black Sabbath, because that part of his brain, that practice, that keep going, he built that neurology up so much that part didn't get destroyed. It was all the other functions that got destroyed, but that part was so strong, it withstood even all that chemical barrage of damage he did. So he was an interesting guy when you talk about it from a place of, you know, real life examples. Ozzy's a good public figure for that, because he really did function at a pretty high level of what part of his brain was growing versus he was damaging everything else. But that part was so built up and so strong it almost wasn't touched and affected. And then he would talk in between. He would sing in between, and then in between the songs he would talk, and you couldn't understand a word he was saying. It was crazy, but a real life example.
Yeah, Keith Richards, I've heard the same thing about, that they'd say, you know, you just put the guitar in his hand, he'd be doped out of his head, but that he'd be playing just incredible, perfectly.
Because neurologically they're just geared towards that, and that's what makes a runner, and a pole vaulter, and a basketball player.
Yeah, Little Richard, who did not have the chemical abuse, but what is MS, I think he has.
I think so.
Where he is, you know, almost unable to walk, but you put him in front of a piano, and he can still do his thing, because that is still dialed in and ingrained.
That's neuroplasticity, what they call neuroplasticity, the growing of neurons at its best.
So one of my dad's great joys, and one of the things we were talking about, that really makes life pleasurable to him, is being able to play golf. He's been a big golfer for a long time. To be able to maintain some kind of ability to play golf would do an awful lot to making life pleasurable. Driving in golf is what we always talked about. As long as he has his freedom and his ability to have that kind of recreation would be there. He's certainly built the muscle memory and the neurons over the year to be able to do those things if we can get the pain out of the way.
Yeah, and we just got to support the structure to make sure that, you know, it's not going to be play and then pay for it for days afterwards, which is usually, unfortunately, the case we all get into.
So your thoughts on making him more physically capable in order to do things like that?
For sure. Yeah, we'll definitely build up the strength. Got to get him straightened out. Golf's a tough sport.
A lot of torque.
It's a lot of torque on the upper body, you know, and then the spine is not like golf. It's the toughest sport on your back that there's going to be, but, you know, doesn't mean that it can't be done. I can't be held responsible, though, if your score doesn't get better, though. That you can't help me out on the task for. And I'm not going out there and playing with you because I'm terrible. I'm the atypical doctor. I do not play golf.
Now, what about PT? Is there someone that you would recommend, or is there a time when we begin to do physical therapy, or is that part of this?
You know what? It's kind of part of this. And the interesting side of this is as you start strengthening things neurologically, you'll instantly start seeing muscular strength changes. So a lot of the stuff that has to happen physical therapy-wise does occur when you're just building up the nervous system, because, again, it gets back into our conversation of muscle memory and nerve muscle memory. That increases the output to the muscle. You know, anything else that has to do in between it, then we can obviously do that. And, you know, in that case scenario, since we're traveling, we set you up with somebody back there who you know, back home, who can kind of even take that to the next level if we need be. Let's see what we're at here. Let's see how we did on this.
See, look at that. My feet, I'm just pushing them together here. I'm even on both sides, and he's pretty well even, one side versus the other. And even coming up in a straight line, we're still off, but it's significantly better from where it was. All right, my friend. Pretty good. I'm going to sit you up here, and again, take your time when you get to the top. Throw your legs over, but just make sure you have your balance. Yeah.
You know, this idea of torque and the bend on the spine, it so much comes from those brain waves. Because when that spasms that musculature, you know, if there's already this, it just creates that. It's that pull. And even as you do this, you're telling those brain waves to calm down, calm down, calm down. And just in that, you start to see those muscles release, and that starts to then let you sink back to center. We're going to get to the point where once we can reset that to it staying that way normal, we'll unwind as much of that musculature as you can to stay upright as much as possible. That'll do wonders for your golf game for sure. That'll do wonders for your golf game for sure. The more we can get you upright. Right now, when you're that uneven, when you're leaning this far to the side, your body, your brain expends a tremendous amount of energy just to relate you to gravity, just to
Maybe
relate you to,
balance.
yeah, just to relate you to balance, because your body's got that pressure pulling us down. But your body's wasting a lot of energy just posturally trying to keep you upright. You take that pressure off, and again, that energy, there's a finite amount of energy we have that's going to go direct to someplace else. And hopefully, at this point, again, your brain always gets the priority. So any extra energy goes there and function.
Whether it's today or another day, at some point, could we take his shirt off and maybe you guide me through his back, and we could really road map it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We can even get like a skin marking pencil and just boop, 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 boop.
exactly, and say, let's really, yeah, I mean, from a visual standpoint, that would be
You know,
great
even
for me.
too, again, I'm not huge on, I mean, we know what kind of way you are, but if you want from something from a diagnostic standpoint, we take an x-ray. And you can actually measure curves and changes and things like that. You know, I try to keep all that radiation down to a minimum, obviously, when you know what you're dealing with here, but if you're so inclined to see the actual structure of it, then you can have it before and after, kind of a neat thing.
That would be really neat. Yeah, anything where we can, because that, as we talked about, is a big part of this. We want to show people, here's what's happening. We talked about maybe at some point, like you said, getting the water tested that can show some of the ionic, you know, the things you mentioned. Anything that we can scientifically show would just bolster the case of what
Yeah, of
we're
course.
doing.
Love
And,
it.
you know,
Yeah, that's always fun stuff.
okay.
Yeah, good stuff.
Good, man.
All right, again, same thing. Pay attention. See how you feel. It's going to do one of three things. Okay, it's either going to do about what it did the last time, stay about the same for the same amount of period of time. It's going to go longer. You'll feel better for a little bit longer. We hope that goes. Or it may even not be quite as long. There's no right or wrong with it. It's how your body's going to react, and that's just what we want to say. So just pay attention. Yeah, same thing as always.
And for our case, for our our timeline of when things are happening, are you just seeing on a day by day basis where we're at?
Yeah,
or- okay.
first couple of visits here, we'll kind of just see how your body reacts to everything, and then we'll probably by the end of this week, we're going to start putting other stuff in as far as nutrition and everything
Great.
else. Especially before, I thought we have the weekend to kind of sit and wrap your head around it, you know, and look over everything, and then we'll obviously answer questions as we go, and then start supplements wise too.
Yeah,
Probably
and, so, yeah, and that's the thing, no pressure, but anything you could do to roadmap me just helps me.
Yeah.
Let me know if
Yeah.
there's days because I can't be here every day, but days that I need to be here. Or, you
Yeah,
know.
sure, no problem. Okay, pretty good.
Thanks,
All right,
Doc.
See how we done, no worse. See you.
That's the lowest elevator in the state.
I know. Killing me. Oh, now it's going. You thought you had nerve problems.
And we're headed. Star one. The Express. This is not a local, this is the Express. So we'll go to China. Pimi.
All right, Dad. Day 2. How's your experience with the session today?
Well, it was very similar to yesterday. I don't know that I noticed any difference in the treatment, which is, as I explained, it would be. Probably water still turn to shit. So I guess I still have plenty of stuff in me.
This is a 3-month process potentially, hopefully a little shorter like you're trying to do it, 4 days a week. Is there a point where you get concerned about when you see progress, or do you feel patient?
Oh, always from that. I've seen enough progress so far, and I guess I'm reassured by his manner, his response, his willingness that I have confidence in. So I'm hopeful. And not, it's a crapshoot, but he's he seems so certain that he can help, and he seems to have a good reason for it. Best I can tell. I'm hopeful.
Well, if it's a crapshoot, it's coming at your feet.
Yeah, it's definitely a shooting.
We've talked before about the placebo effect and about hope
Yeah.
and things that people scientifically kind of point to in maybe a negative light. But from your standpoint, is there a benefit to looking at things positively?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there is. I believe in the placebo effect. The mind is a very strong organ. I guess it's an organ. But it can lead you quite a ways. So that's got to be helpful. And I don't care where the help comes from.
Yeah, it's interesting because, on the one hand, the disease is a disease of the brain. At the same time, you're using the brain to provide that positive effect. Because I've seen you up and down. I mean, at spring training, you mentioned maybe feeling pretty flat, like you were out of hope.
Yeah. There are times when it feels that way. And you just go. That's why I'm so interested in this, because the first idea in a long time that just being around people that believe they can do it, make a difference is nice.
Well, and that's what I think changing the message somewhat is too. Previously perhaps there was this idea of looking for the cure, and whether or not that happens, if the idea is, well, can I live better for the time I have regardless of a cure, seems to be more about where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we mentioned a couple of those markers for your quality of life.
Yeah, being able to swing a golf club and having the stamina to do it, and driving. Those are important things.
Knowing the kind of brutal nature of golf, and as you mentioned about the difficulty what it does to the spine, and we talked about a workout hero like Tiger and what happens to him even, is there a way for you to enjoy golf, you think, differently? Or is there something that if you get some of your physical prowess back and in less pain, is there something else you can access you think that would give you the same kind of pleasure?
Another sport or another endeavor?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about the same kind, but it would be. There's got to be something. It really depends on the ongoing ability to be able to concentrate for a period of time without pain and lack of strength. I'm sure I could find something. But I first want to get my back straightened out. Then we'll see.
Yeah. And like I said, I just wonder about that from the standpoint of doing damage to a relatively healthy body, potentially by what is maybe a violent sport to your spine in particular.
I know I have to be responsible for that. I would hope the doctor would be candid enough to tell me, yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. I'd ask him.
Yeah.
But I know I have the first responsibility for that.
Part of it maybe is about kind of going back to that story about the woman and her birthday party, and looking at what you can have versus maybe what you can't. And if you have health but maybe golf, and again, I'm not going anywhere with this, just kind of playing with the ideas, but golf, which has been a marker for all these years for you, maybe can't be the same regular balance. You maybe still have the physical prowess to live in a pain-free environment.
Yeah, I would go golf for pain-free. I would definitely do that if it came to that. A little bit of pain.
What's it like to hang out with the kids like you did last night?
Oh, it's good. It's just to see them watch their little minds work.
What were they up to out there?
Oh, all kinds of. They were just bouncing from one thing to the next. They they're blowing bubbles and riding cars. I remember having a toy box, and every time I went into it, it was like rediscovering it, and what a thrill that was. And I could see that in them. It was like it was new stuff, and something about putting stuff away for a while that makes it magic. That's what they were doing. They were having a ball going through the old stuff.
Pull out the box and, oh my gosh, look at this.
Yeah, I can't remember. I did that until I was probably 14 years old. Box in my closet. Loved it.
And even if the stuff wouldn't change, it was your perception that changed.
All kinds of memories.
What do you think made you stop looking in that box?
Girls. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Different kind of box.
Yeah, well,